Welcome back, focused learners. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating and, honestly, deeply ambitious document that recently landed right on the desks of the world's top diplomats. It's called the 21 May 2026 Consciousness Introspection Day Appeal. Basically, we're looking at a massive, global, spiritual, and philosophical initiative aimed at literally upgrading the systems that run our world. What makes this so intriguing isn't just the sheer scale of the diplomatic outreach, though that is huge, but how it attempts to blend high-level international policy with deep introspective wisdom. We're going to break down exactly what this document proposes, how it actually plans to get there, and what it's asking from both world leaders and everyday citizens like us.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering 1. A global call to action. 2. 3 existential crises. 3. The paradigm shifts. 4. Grounding vision in daily life. And finally, 5. The 9-minute introspection.
Starting right off with Section 1, a global call to action. This really was an administrative milestone. The first thing to wrap our heads around is that this wasn't just some theoretical white paper floating around academia. It was a highly coordinated initiative executed on May 24th and 25th of 2026.
Now, to truly grasp the scope of this outreach, you have to look at the delivery rate, 96.9%. This appeal was officially dispatched to 196 permanent representatives at the United Nations. Hitting a 96.9% delivery rate means this philosophical framework successfully made its way into the official diplomatic records of pretty much every single nation on Earth. For a grassroots initiative to establish that level of engagement at the highest diplomatic tiers, that is absolutely massive.
If we break those numbers down a bit, we're looking at 190 successful email deliveries against just 6 returned or bounced emails. And, the organizers actually included these exact stats right in their infographics. They don't even view those 6 returns as failures. Instead, they frame them as necessary reminders of persistence. It's a really interesting mindset, this idea that every barrier you hit is literally just another step in building global resolve.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, 3 existential modern crises, which represents a civilizational turning point. So, why was this massive document sent out in the first place? Well, according to the appeal, it's because humanity is currently standing at a decisive crossroads. The document identifies 3 converging global threats that we're all facing right now: climate change, the persistent risk of nuclear catastrophe, and the rapid evolution of unregulated AI. But the core argument here is that these aren't just isolated political or tech problems, right? They are profound symptoms of a much deeper disconnect. The appeal frames these crises as something that requires a unified civilizational response. It argues we can't just slap a policy fix on them. We actually need a fundamental shift in how we approach our collective existence.
Which naturally brings us to Section 3, the 3 paradigm shifts. These are essentially the 3 proposed solutions. To tackle those existential threats, the document relies heavily on a really fascinating triad of shifting global frameworks. First up, what's really interesting here is the direct contrast it draws between our current tech trajectory and a totally new vision. It suggests shifting from mere artificial intelligence, which, at the end of the day, is just a tool that computes, to conscious aspirational intelligence, or CAI. The framework argues that our tech is desperately in need of an ethical upgrade. The actual phrase used in the source material is, AI computes, CAI cares. It proposes blending consciousness and compassion right into tech development, so that artificial intelligence is guided by human wisdom, instead of just becoming another competitive weapon for global dominance.
The second major shift takes traditional corporate social responsibility and turns it into corporate spiritual responsibility. The document advocates for this concept it calls soul accountability. So instead of just tracking carbon footprints or focusing on, social PR, it proposes ethical leadership rooted in much deeper qualities. The text specifically references traits like the wisdom of Krishna and the generosity of Karna from Hindu tradition. The goal is to ground modern corporate leadership in a real sense of mental well-being, ethics, and conscious action.
And the final piece of this triad moves from international security diplomacy to universal, holistic diplomacy. This is essentially a massive call to move away from nation-centric power politics, where countries are just constantly competing for dominance, and pivot toward a humanity-centric diplomacy. The argument is that to actually solve global threats, our diplomatic language needs a complete paradigm shift, one aimed at absolute harmony and eventually total global disarmament.
Now, underpinning all 3 of these shifts is a foundational acronym you see repeated throughout the entire document: UBUMUD. That stands for universal brotherhood, universal mind or mission, and universal disarmament. The appeal suggests that these three principles are literally the missing link that world leaders have been searching for. It proposes this trio as the structural rhythm we need to safely guide civilization forward and out of our current crises.
All right, Section 4, Grounding Vision in Daily Life. Daily life reality. This is where the document brilliantly pivots from these massive abstract concepts of global diplomacy into remarkably practical everyday settings.
The appeal uses a unique triangular reflection to map these giant cosmic ideas directly onto very human dimensions. It notes that something as simple as a metro journey teaches us coexistence. It observes that cremation grounds teach us impermanence and humility. And it points out that nature teaches us interdependence. By anchoring profound philosophical truths in these very ordinary earthly settings, the appeal ensures its framework doesn't just float away into abstract theory. It stays connected to real life.
There's a quote in the source material that perfectly captures this. Metro teaches coexistence. Public systems teach cooperation. The document dives deep into the metaphor of the Delhi Metro, specifically praising the disciplined, selfless infrastructural model built by Dr. E. Sridharan. The author actually reflects on their own humble daily commute on public transport, traveling shoulder to shoulder with workers on scooters or cycles. It frames this shared, punctual, orderly public space as a living, breathing blueprint of universal brotherhood in action. It's a great reminder that real peace and high vision have to start right on the ground.
Now, it is absolutely crucial to note the cultural anchors of this document. The initiative respectfully blends Hindu devotional elements and Vedic principles, like citing Ma Adi Parashakti and the Bhagavad Gita, with modern global challenges. However, it explicitly states that it makes no claim of ownership over these universal ideas. By putting such a heavy emphasis on humility, non-dogmatism, and collective reflection, the document frames itself not as some ideological demand, but as a very open invitation for civilizational dialogue.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, the 9-minute introspection, the action step. Let's see how all of this builds toward actual engagement. What exactly is this appeal asking the UN, AI companies, and regular citizens to actually do? Well, the document outlines a very specific roadmap. It designates May 21st, 2026 as Introspection Day. This kicks off a symbolic global dialogue period that runs from June 20th to September 26th of 2026. This window is meant to foster deep ethical reflection, which the framework hopes will eventually lead to its ultimate long-term goal, complete global disarmament by the year 2034.
But the immediate action step, the primary call to action, is stunningly simple. It asks for exactly 9 minutes of conscious introspection. It's not a protest, it's not a financial pledge, it is a peaceful global pause. It is an elegant psychological invitation for governments, researchers, and citizens to just silently reflect on ethical tech, trust building, and ecological balance. It's all about fostering collective evolution from the inside out.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought, taken straight from the source material. What if 196 nations paused for 9 minutes, not for profit, but for consciousness? It's a profound question that really challenges us to imagine what unified silent reflection could do for a fractured world. Whether you see this as a symbolic gesture or a highly practical diplomatic blueprint, the sheer scale and sincerity of this proposal give us all something fascinating to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.